Let's go to the live event room. So you can start chatting anytime.
You mean with people other than you, Boyd? Are we all ready for another Did You Know? I can't believe we're already up to Did You Know number 35. That does not seem possible. It doesn't seem like we've been doing them that long, but then some days it seems like we've been doing them forever. Just kind of depends.
Isn't that true? Say hello to everybody on Facebook.
Hi, everybody on Facebook. Thanks for joining us today. We're looking forward to another fun episode of Did You Know? I'm still not seeing that part show up, so I'm going to hit a refresh on my Facebook one more time so that we can work on that.
I will pin it to the top. I still haven't done that yet. Pin to the top. Got 3 there.
Right. We've got some fun stuff to talk about today.
All about status indicators. Give us a little highlight before you start.
There are so many different types of status indicators. And we received a question that said, can you talk about status indicators? And I wanted to reply, which ones? Because there are a bunch. There are some for payment, and there are some for modifiers, and there are some for edits, and there are all these different status indicators. So my emphasis today is going to be all around, well, how do you figure out where those different status indicators are, where they live, where you can find information on them, what they mean, all of that good stuff. So that's kind of what we're going to focus on today. And I'm going to mute my... Oop. All right, I've got it, Boyd.
You're ready to go.
All right. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump in and let's get started on today's Did You Know, all about status indicators. Let me go to the next slide. Oh, well, that's not the right screen. So I'm actually going to click just past that. And I want to talk about status indicators and the fact that the question that we received through the topic request form was, well, can you present on status indicators? Can you give us information about status indicators? And my initial response was yes, but which ones? Because there are status indicators for lots and lots of different things. So I thought, all right, well, maybe I should just start out by showing where you can find all the different status indicators that exist for Medicare, because my focus today is going to be on Medicare. Medicare calls lots of different things indicators or status indicators. And sometimes they're payment status indicators, sometimes they're modifier status indicators, sometimes they're global period status indicators. But they've got indicators for everything. A great place that many of those live and coexist all together cohesively is within the Medicare Claims Processing Manual, which is Chapter 23 of the Medicare IOMs, right, the Internet Only Manuals, Publication 100-04, which is the Medicare Claims Processing Manual. And I actually gave you a link directly to Chapter 23, but I wanted to show you how I found it and how I went about doing this search. So I'm going to go over to my browser for a minute. And all I did was start with a Google search, right? And I put in, right, our neat little trick that Lorene has showed so many of us. You just put in the word site, S-I-T-E, and colon. And then I'm going to put in what site do I want to search. Well, because they're usually Medicare status indicators, I want to search the CMS website, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Then I want to tell it exactly what terms I'm trying to find. So I'm going to put in status indicator. And I hit return. And I'm going to get this whole listing of all of the things. You'll notice every website says cms.gov, and they're all the different options for status indicators. I've got payment status indicators, proposed status indicators, the claims processing manual where you see I've got fee schedule status indicators, payment policy indicators. I've got all these different things listed throughout here. So the one I wound up going with was publication 100-04, the Claims Processing Manual, Chapter 23. And I actually have that open right here. And once I opened that document, I thought, all right, well, how am I going to find, I don't want to have to read through, because I don't know about you, but there's a lot of information. This is 391 pages. I don't want to have to read through everything to try to find it. And yeah, I could skim it, but chances are I may miss the word I'm looking for. So what I did was do a really quick find, and say, all right, I'm looking for the word indicator. How many times does the word indicator pop up? Well, it pops up a lot. And as I kind of scroll through, you'll see I've got, correct coding modifier indicators. I've got fee schedule status indicators. I've got payment policy status indicators. And it begins to take me through the manual, showing me where all of these different modifier status indicators, payment status indicators, where all of them live, what they mean, how they apply. I took all of that information and then put it into my presentation. So if we look to the next slide, we've got correct coding modifier indicators. So if you work with NCCI edits or CCI edits, right, the correct coding initiative edits, particularly the procedure to procedure edits, sometimes referred to as the P2P, where you're saying, can I build these two procedures together, yes or no? Then you're going to get a modifier status indicator. Let me show you how this looks. Let's go over to Find a Code. Find a Code up here, because Find a Code has my nifty little NCCI validator. And I can put in a couple of different codes. Oop. Well, I gotta sign in first. Let me sign in so my box will work. Okay. And it has some that are defaulted there, and I can hit validate, put in whatever codes I'm looking for. And as I scroll through here, you'll notice I start to get warnings and I start to get errors. Well, as we look through here, Find a Code does not give me the 019 that I'm used to finding. I get that if I use the AAPC coder. I get that if I use just the NCCI edits from the CMS website. Find a Code is nice and gives me a little more information and says, hey, there's an edit. Yes, you can use a modifier, or no, you can't. If I'm just searching on the CMS website and I'm looking at the NCCI edits in that big spreadsheet that they provide, instead of telling me yes, no, what they're going to do is they're going to give me, let me find my slide. They're going to give me either a 0 or 1 or a 9, and I have to either know or know where to find what each of those means. If you're using a system that gives you the 0, the 1, or the 9, here's what it means. If it says a 0, it says a CCM, which is a correct coding modifier, is not allowed and will not bypass the edits, which means you cannot apply a modifier to those two codes, and if there is an edit, that edit, it cannot be broken by the use of a modifier. A 1 says, yes, you can use a modifier, it's allowed, and it will bypass the edit. This is a lot of times where we see people using and misusing modifier 59, modifier 25 to bypass certain edits. If you see a 9, it means the use of the modifier is not specified. This indicator is used for all code pairs that have a deletion date that is the same as the effective date. The indicator was created so that no blank spaces would be in the indicator field. So really, the concept of a modifier doesn't even apply when you're talking about a 9. It means you don't need a modifier. It's just there so that you don't have a blank row in that particular table. So you really care more about the 0s and the 1s than you do about the 9s. So that's just one type of status indicator. The next one that we came to is the Medicare Fee Schedule Database. That's what that MFSDB means. It's the Medicare Fee Schedule Database. If you've used the Medicare Fee Schedule at all, and let's go over and look at what that looks like. If we go to the CMS website, cms.gov, and up here at the top we put in Physician Fee Schedule, and I'm going to go to the lookup. It actually takes me to a lookup tool. If you've not used this, it comes in handy quite frequently. I'm going to start a search. And there's a lot of information you can glean from this particular tool on the CMS website. Basically, I have to put in the parameters of my search. What information do I want? And this is all about the physician fee schedule. So I can say, all right, I want 2017. Maybe I want, let's say, pricing information on a specific CPT code for all Medicare administrative contractors. Then I just have to put in the code that I'm looking for information on. And I'm going to put in a 10060, just because it's come to the top of my head. And then you need to select which modifiers you want information on. I always select all modifiers. It's just a habit that I have, because I'd rather have more information than not enough. Hit submit. and you'll notice that I'm going to start seeing different status indicators. I see a procedure status indicator telling me the payment status. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. And, well, currently those are the only ones I see, so I'm going to switch this from payment to say, what if I want all the information they have on that particular code? Oh, my nose itches. We scroll down here, and now I start to see some other things. As I work my way across, I get all of the different values, RVU values, whether it's facility or non-facility, but this is where I said you'll see lots of other status indicators. I see status indicators for whether or not I can use professional component and technical component. I see indicators for the global period. I see indicators for whether or not it's a bilateral surgery, a multiple surgery, an assistant surgeon, a co-surgeon. Those are all whether or not certain modifiers can be used. Status indicators for teaching physicians. I see even more as I continue to slide across. Those are all considered indicators of one type or another. So what I did, again, is using the claims processing manual here, I went through and found the information that I could on all of these different indicators. Here's where I found that table on correct coding modifier indicators. It tells me right here the same information that's on my slide. If I go down a little farther, down through here, it's going to take me down to the limiting charge and CCI edits. So it's going to give me another indicator related to the physician fee schedule database that tells me whether or not it's a bundled code, if it's valid for Medicare or not, if it's a non-covered service, if it's statutorily excluded, meaning that Medicare never ever pays for it. It's not included in Medicare coverage. Again, whether or not it's bundled, if there's restricted coverage, all of these different indicators still apply. So if I go over to my slides, you'll find that's the same thing I have here, right? Payment for comprehensive procedure is going to include all the component procedures. That's what it means when it says something's bundled. It means when you bill for this comprehensive procedure, it includes all these other little pieces, everything else that you had to do to perform that particular procedure. There are more status indicators here. Every status or every service under the Medicare physician or Medicare fee schedule database has a status indicator, and this is kind of the full table that tells you what they all mean. A means it's an active code, it can be paid separately. B means that its payment for a covered service is bundled into another service, so they're not going to pay separately for the RVUs associated with it. A C indicator says that, and remember, these are fee schedule indicators, not outpatient prospective payment system status indicators, which also have an A, a B, and a C, but they mean something totally different. So that's why I say when you say that you want information on a status indicator, you really need to know what kind of status indicator are you looking for. I put the entire table here in my slides for the physician fee schedule. Click through, you'll actually see they're all there all the way down to X. If we go back over to the document here, we scroll down a little farther. Bear with me because the way I'm searching it, it takes it a minute to catch up with me. Down in section 30.2.2, which I tried to put on the slides, right up here, will show you where I pulled that full table from so that you can go out there and pull this document down or know where to find this document as it does change, right? It was originally issued 10/9 of 2015. It was revised last year on January 1st. It was implemented on January 4th, and it will continue to evolve as Medicare makes additional changes, as they do with everything. Once we finish with the physician fee schedule modifiers, then we have other modifiers that come along. You'll notice, see, PTCT indicators, multiple surgery indicators, rural fee indicators. There are all sorts of indicators. What I'm working down to is the next section where they actually break all of this down. And it's really when they talk about the file layout and how everything fits in to the payment file. So if I go back over to my slides, okay, I've broken these into different tables for you because they're all kind of in one big table in that document, but we'll go through both places. So global surgery indicators. We pretty much are all familiar, hopefully, with minor procedures and major procedures, and the fact that the difference between the two is the associated global days, right? A minor procedure is considered anything that has a 0-day global period or a 10-day global period, and a major procedure is something that has a 90-day global period. But those are actually not the only global surgery indicators that we have. Yes, 0, 10, and 90 are here, and they're the usual descriptions that we're used to, but there are other descriptors. For example, if it's a maternity code, it's going to have an MMM status indicator that says it's a maternity code and the usual global period doesn't apply. It's a different type of global period. If it's an XXX, there is no global concept for that particular service. YYY means that the Medicare administrative contractor determines whether or not it's what the global concept is for that particular procedure, as well as pricing. And ZZZ says that the code is related to another service, and it's always included in the global period. With these ZZZs, typically you see those on add-on codes in CPT. They're oftentimes going to have a ZZZ saying, can't bill them by themselves, they're rolled up in the global service of whatever the primary procedure is that they're billed in addition to. Again, the same information comes from this table here. As we scroll down, you're going to find this is where they talk about the technical component, professional component, and then just below there, we wind up with the global surgery indicators, just as I went through for you in that table, talk through all the different ones. Some of the things that I did not put in my slides because they're here in this document is if you want to read through, they will give you information on the different modifiers and the indicators related to those. So like the professional and technical components. Remember the professional component is modifier 26. The technical component is usually represented by the TC modifier. And when we were looking at the Medicare physician fee schedule over here, there was a column just for PCTC. And all of these, in this case, for this particular code, had a 0. Well, that's where we could come back over to the manual and say, oh, a 0 says it's a physician service code, and the indicator identifies that this is a physician service. The concept of professional component and technical component does not apply since this is already split, right? It is just the physician service. I can't split it any further. So this actually comes in handy for me when I'm trying to look at a procedure and go, okay, does technical and professional component apply? Can I use it here? And if I'm working from the fee schedule database, this is where I look to see what my answer really is. The other nice thing is for most of these, they give you some examples. For example, when we get down under professional component only, they say, an example of a professional component only code is 93010, the electrocardiogram, interpretation and report. Modifier 26 and TC cannot be used with this code because we've already split it, right? The global code is the 93000. 93010 is just one component of that global service. Same thing with the technical component, right? 93005 is the technical piece. 93010 is the professional piece. If they're both done by the same entity, that's when we go to the global code, the 93000. So that comes in handy. You also find that there are separate professional technical component indicators for global tests that indicate that it's a standalone code that describes the professional component or the technical component only, and you can't put modifiers on those either. There's lots and lots of different indicators for the professional and technical component. They're all listed out there for you. Then they go into the multiple procedures. This all ties back to that physician fee schedule database. Bilateral surgery indicators, right? Whether or not you can use modifier 50. They go through, yes, and if so, what's the adjusted payment rate, right? For example, if it's a bilateral surgery indicator of 0, means that the 150% payment adjustment for bilateral procedures does not apply. It's not a bilateral procedure. If it's a 1, it says that it does apply, and you can report it with a modifier 50. If it is a 2, the 150% payment adjustment does not apply, and the RVUs are already based on the procedure being performed being a bilateral procedure. So that procedure already says it's bilateral. It doesn't do me any good to add a modifier 50. So that comes in handy. Then they go through the assistant surgery modifiers, the global surgery modifiers and status indicators, team surgeons, right? It just keeps going. So now you know why I had that initial thought when somebody said, oh, can you explain indicators? Well, sure, if you tell me which indicators you're looking for. If we go back over to the PowerPoint, so we went through the global surgery indicators. We talked about the professional and technical components, and I've got that on a couple of slides because they do go on and on and on, right? The descriptions for all of them are there. Before we jump straight to the outpatient prospective payment system, I want to go back over for just a minute to this same document, because just because we hit the bottom of the file layout does not mean that we have found all of the opportunities for indicators and where all of the indicators are listed. Let me get through these because there are a few more farther down. Get there. Oh, go back up one. For example, durable medical equipment. Those have an indicator to tell you whether or not it qualifies and what pricing amounts may have changed. All you have to do is look for the words, right? Look for indicator, look for status indicator, look for the things that you're trying to find information on. There's an indicator in the record field telling you if it's a price change indicator, telling you where changes may have been made in a fee schedule from year to year. New indicator for rural fee indicator. Those are for our rural health clinics and rural health hospitals. Notice why I say there's indicators everywhere. They just keep going. The most common indicator that I find people ask about or have struggles with outside of those related to the fee schedule, because usually the fee schedules, usually when I get a question regarding a status indicator, it's usually about that fee schedule or it's about the outpatient prospective payment system payment indicators. I gave you a link here on the slide. This is to Nuridium Medicare. And the easiest way to find this one was just to go out and Google Outpatient Prospective Payment System, or OPPS, status indicators. Takes you right here to the Nuridium website. I like the Nuridium website because they're one of the few places that doesn't kind of put it in paragraph form. They put it in a nice table where it's a little easier for me to follow. So I've got that pulled up out here as well. Here's the Nuridium website. You'll notice currently they're the Medicare Administrative Contractor for Jurisdiction E, Medicare Part A for all of the kind of western states, California, Hawaii, Nevada, American Samoa, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, that sort of thing. But down underneath here, they outline the Outpatient Prospective Payment System status indicators. These tell you whether or not Medicare is going to pay for a certain service, and if so, how it will be reimbursed. All of these indicators tie to specific CPT codes and will tell you, oh, well, that has a status indicator of C, meaning it's inpatient only. We won't pay for it in the outpatient environment. Patient has to be in the hospital, and they're only going to get paid under the inpatient prospective payment system for that piece. As we look through here, you'll notice this is another big long list. It goes on and on and on. From A to Z, there are a few letters missing, like D, right, because they don't use that one. But they let us know whether or not it is paid under this particular payment system or not, if it's paid under a different payment system, if it is considered an additional payment, or if it's bundled into payment for something else. For example, they make additional payments for what they call drug or biological pass-throughs. And those are typically really expensive pieces of the procedure that they're like, we better make an additional payment because we know there's an additional cost outside of the usual RVU for the supplies or for the medications associated with that particular procedure. They do the same thing with status indicator H, telling you that there's additional payments for things like brachytherapy and radiopharmaceutical agents. Again, things that can be very costly, and they give you kind of a pass to get them through the system to get an additional payment made for them for a certain period of time. They let you know if it's not a pass-through. It's not going to get any additional payment. It's not going to be paid separately. It's all bundled into your primary service. Flu and pneumonia vaccines, services that are not billable to the fiscal intermediary, whether or not there's no additional payment made, whether they'll pay for a partial hospitalization, all of these different things factor in. It can be very overwhelming when you look at status indicators and all of the different places that they have status indicators. It's kind of like all of the acronyms that we have in healthcare, right? And we're always coming up with a different one, right? LE could mean lower extremity. LE could mean light effect. CP could mean chest pain. It could be cerebral palsy. It could be chronic pain. It could be all these different things. The same thing with these indicators. They may all be the same. We could have well, what do I do with a C indicator? Well, it depends. Where are you getting that C indicator? What is it related to? Is it related to payment on the outpatient side? Is it related to the physician fee schedule? Is it related to the options that you have for mainly the fee schedule and the different types of edits that you get there? All of those different status indicators, what does it really all add up to? You really have to know where to go find what it is you're looking for and recognize that there are different status indicators for pretty much everything that you're trying to do within the Medicare system. And you've got to be attuned to which indicators are you really looking for at that time. That's why I gave you the link back on the very first slide to the go back to that slide for a second, to the Medicare Claims Processing Manual, Chapter 23, where the vast majority of them live. Pretty much all of them are defined in that particular manual, with the exception of the Outpatient Prospective Payment System status indicators. They're all, where's my link? Right here. In this link right up here. It's easy to find this if you don't have this link, if you're looking for the Claims Processing Manual. I'll show you how to do that real quick. If we go over to Medicare. So we're going to go to the Medicare website, cms.gov. And how do I find the internet-only manuals? Well, how I find them every time I go out here, even if they change the website, because about the time you get used to navigating the Medicare website, it seems to change. Sometimes I think they do it on purpose, right? Just as soon as I get comfortable, something moves. Well, if I scroll down to the bottom, in this case, there are the top 5 resources. Every time they've changed their website in the last few years, they always still have this box on there. So as long as they have this box, I'm okay. This box and the search feature, I can work with those two things. But down here under the top resources, there is an option for manuals. If you go in there, you're looking for those internet-only manuals, the IOMs, and it gives you the full list. The one that we were living in, the one we were messing with, was the Claims Processing Manual. And specifically, we were looking at Chapter 23, which is all about fee schedule administration. That's what most of those status indicators have to do with, is the fee schedule, the coding requirements, how things are reported to the carrier. So that's how I got to that PDF file, had I not done a Google search to find it. Better take a minute and look and see if there are questions. Let's see. Don't forget, if you've got questions, please make sure that you put them over in the chat on Facebook so that we can answer those as we go, if that's something that, let's see. In what area of coding do the status indicators apply most specifically? That's a good question. Most specifically, it comes to the application of modifiers and which services can be reported together. So you see it more in a billing perspective. Yes, you see it from a coding perspective when you're working in the real world outside of a learning environment, right? When you're in the learning environment, we're teaching you the coding rules. We're not usually going into the NCCI edits in a lot of detail. And that's because those NCCI edits are considered payer rules. They're not based on the coding rules, they are, but they're more restrictive. They add further limitations to the way that things are applied. So when we do that and we look at those NCCI edits, that's where we start to see some of the status indicators in telling us, right, our code pairs, which ones work together. We see some of them in defining our global periods for those different codes, which is also a billing related feature. But then we also see them when we look at the fee schedule in allowing modifiers to bust up those edits, to paint the full picture of what was going on with that patient. Yes, maybe we provided a service and there was an assistant surgeon there during the entire procedure. However, when we look at the fee schedule database, maybe it says there is no, an assistant surgeon's not allowed for that particular service. Well, there may be a good reason for that, right? The assistant surgeon may say, no, you can't bill for that. Yeah, that's great that there was an assistant surgeon there, but you can't bill for it. Why would you have circumstances like that? Well, I can give you a great example of this. I used to do a lot of work with a particular orthopedist who took his physician assistant to every surgery with him. And he did it because he thought he could bill for that physician assistant regardless of the procedure. And a perfect example of one that I had to talk to him about was they were doing a procedure setting a broken pinky. Anybody else see a problem with needing a physician assistant for a very straightforward broken pinky? You know, I kind of jokingly, I didn't say to the provider, but when I was talking to the provider that I worked for as a compliance officer and trying to figure out why they might not need a PA, it was kind of funny because the physician that I was working for looked at me and says, did the pinky weigh 500 pounds? Why did he need a second person there just to set that pinky, to pop it back in place? Because that's truly all he was doing. And that's why we have the limitations that we do in the fee schedule. And it's easier for them to give us a number than it is to say, oh, no, or yes, maybe, sometimes, right? They give us those different numbers to qualify that status and just make it easier visually, right? It's a lot easier to read this and go, oh, I have a 0 and go figure out what the 0 means. Yes, it would be nice to say, oh, that means no, and it's said right on there. But there's so many different status indicators. Imagine how big this table would be if we did that. It'd be nearly impossible to really read well and follow along with. All right, let's see. So are status indicators addressed on the CPC exam? No. Modifiers are included on the CPC exam, but they're not going to ask you about a status indicator. Remember, the CPC exam is on the coding requirements. If we look, let's answer that question real quick. Let's go straight to the AAPC website and look and see what they say is included on the exam. If we go to aapc.com and we go under certifications and we scroll down, this tells me right here what kind of questions they're going to ask me about. And while they will ask me about coding guidelines, there is nothing in here that tells me they're going to ask me about payment rules. And status indicators only come into play when we start talking about payment. We start talking about whether or not modifiers apply for certain bundled procedures reported together, right? That really comes into a payment side of things. From a pure coding perspective, we can look and see we're billing these two procedures. I need a modifier 59. I need a modifier 24 to say it's unrelated, right? We can tell that from reading the note. And that's really what they ask us about. They're not going to ask you, well, if you've got two NCCI edits and one of them has a status indicator of 1, what does that mean? Because you don't have access to the NCCI edits while you're taking that exam, right? It's a paper-based exam. For some of the other certification exams, like the COC exam or the CIC exam, they do have payment questions included into them, as well as the CPB. There are certain things that they expect you to know. If you're working in the billing area and you're doing the CPB, the Certified Professional Biller, there are certain things that they would expect you to know. There are others that if it's something you would use a resource like NCCI for, they're going to give you the table They're going to give you an excerpt from the NCCI table showing you what the edits are for the scenario that they're giving you, so they can tell whether or not you know how to use that table and apply those codes appropriately. So no, if you're studying for the CPC, don't be all a fret and all a twitter about the status indicators. Do know that coming down the pike, you do need to be familiar with them from a coding and billing perspective, and that they exist. And it's like I say every time, the more that you know, the better off you are, right? If you have a small inkling, oh yeah, I remember Chandra talked about these status indicators, and where did she tell me I could find those again? And you can come back, and if you're a club member, right, you can get in there and you can look in the club and find the same recording, find the links to everything. I know many of you that listen are club members and are probably noticing after I do a presentation, then usually there's something new added to the forum in the club area. Because if I found things like this part of the claims processing manual, I create a little I don't know what to call it, a little nugget, if you will. It's kind of what we refer to them as here at CCO, but I create a little nugget that says status indicators and where to find them. And I put the link in there to that claims processing manual. And then in the little description I say, here's where you find all these different status indicators if you're having a hard time locating them. Because it's a lot easier than to go in the forum and put in status indicator and see that pop up than trying to do the global search on Google and not being able to find exactly what you're looking for. Right? And I encourage you to do the same thing. Even outside of the club, there are certain resources that I know I reference repeatedly, whether I have access to the internet or not. So if it's a PDF and I'm able to download it, I save it. I've got a little thumb drive that's got all sorts of files that I use in doing audits and talking to providers and writing articles that I've found come in handy, and I always go back to look and see if there's been an update to them, depending on if they're beginning to get some age. All right. Any other questions? Let me see if I've got any other ones popping up over there. Switch back to my slides for a minute. Go towards the end. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I'm going to kind of work to the end and start to wrap up for today. Oh, let's see. Wow, there's a lot more in here than I thought there were. So a couple of things as we wrap up. One, I think I've emphasized enough now that there are lots and lots of different status indicators, whether they call it a status indicator, a payment indicator, a correct coding modifier indicator, a professional and technical component indicator, a global surgery indicator, lots and lots and lots of different indicators. Know that there are different ones. Know where to find information on them, or at least know where to start your search. Because if you come to an experienced coder, you know, like myself or like one that you're maybe working with in the industry, you want to be able to show that you're able to do some of the initial groundwork and that you at least made the effort to try to find the information that you were looking for. That you just didn't come and say, okay, I'm hungry, give me a fish, right? That you said, I'm hungry, I cast out a line, I had a lure on there, everything, but I can't find the fish, right? It's just not biting. I know that's a terrible analogy, but it's that whole give a man a fish, teach a man to fish analogy. And that's what you want to be able to do. You want to be able to research and find what you're looking for. And it really all comes down to refining your searches. Put into Google exactly what it is you're looking to find. Ask the question just like you would ask to a person. If there's a specific website you think it's probably on, use that little trick of putting site : and the website that you're looking for it on at the beginning of that question. And it will look specifically at the CMS website or the OIG website or your specific Medicare administrative contractor, whether it be Nuridium or WPS or NGS or all of those different groups that are out there. You really want to make sure that you know where to look. Remember that you're always your own best resource, right? And you want to continue to build what I call your personal brand. And that's not something that I created, right? That's something that we hear in the industry. You are your reputation, you are your brand, and knowing where to research, showing that you're willing to put forth the initiative says a lot about you and your personal brand when it comes to people recognizing your abilities and giving you potential for the future, giving you potential opportunities to continue to move up and move forward. Let's see, looking to see if there's anything else think that's all of the questions that I've got. So I want to thank you guys for joining me today. I hope this was helpful for you. I hope I gave you some new resources to look to when it comes to the world of status indicators and payment indicators and all the different indicators. We will be back again next week at the same time, Wednesday at 2 o'clock, for another Did You Know episode. Not yet picked the topic for next week, so look for that. We'll be announcing that shortly. In the meantime, thanks for joining us and happy learning. Have a great week.
Okay.